Hello, I'm Kimberly Corp.
And I'm Katherine Corp.
And we're the owners of Pilates on Fifth here in New York City and Pilates on Fifth online. And we're here today with a barre technique workout intended to help you to get more out of your barre workouts, whether you do them for fitness or you do them for ballet. So we're just going to give you some tidbits. We were Rockettes, but we've been taking ballet since we were 3, but we were never prima ballerinas by any far stretch of the imagination.
So lower the expectations.
Yes, but the upside of not having it where we were always great at it is we fought for it. So every bit of technique that we had or might still have, we fought for. And we worked really hard at it. So we hope we can help you get more out of your barre workouts. But remember, when you start doing things the right way, sometimes you may feel like you're taking a few steps back, but you will go many steps forward. So let's get started. First thing we'll start with is the pelvis, and Katherine is going to hold on here. Now, many teachers use, and for Pilates and fitness, we use neutral. And for ballet, they often use square. So let's talk about what neutral is. You want the hip bones and the pubic bone in the same vertical plane. So Katherine's going to put her hands on here, fingers to the pubic bone, and you want that in the same vertical plane. So now tilt forward. You can go back thing. Yep, and that would not be what we want. That's an anterior tilt. And then you want to, now we have to demonstrate posterior. We have to kind of bend. It's hard if you're not anatomically posterior to go to posterior. So we don't want that. So that being said, when you do things like bending the knees for your barre classes, whether it's a demi-plie in ballet or one of the pulses you do in barre, you want to make sure you're holding that neutral position. Moreover, turn to the side, you want to make sure you're holding neutral by pulling your abdominal muscles up. Do not over-squeeze. Over-squeeze your glutes. Yes, you don't want that. It's never good. It develops big glute muscles, and it can inhibit when you lift your leg in arabesque. So we don't want that. You want to think that you're using the abdominal muscles to pull the pubic bone up in front, and the tailbone drops down. So I have a mic pack on, so don't think that I'm deformed in any way. So pelvic placement is important in plies as well. We're going to talk about how to turn out in a second, so don't worry, that's coming. But if you're doing your pulses in a fitness barre class, which usually happens, or you're actually taking ballet, you want to make sure your pelvis doesn't do anything awry. So the pelvis stays completely vertical as you bend the knees, yes. What you never want to do is pitch the body forward, yes, even to a small degree. And I know it's very popular to have people rise up on their toes and then squeeze the heels and pulse from there, but that's another time you don't want it to be in that position. Yes. Alrighty, so you want to be nice and vertical. Perfect. So, and the same goes if you ever do a grand plie in second, that you don't want to only go as far. Once it starts getting into that, then you've gone too far. It's important to know. So, let's move on to how to turn out and the important muscles to use for turnout. What we want to avoid doing is, Katherine, do the proverbial throw your feet into a fifth position and then force your knees straight with your glutes and your leg muscles. That is so very bad for your knees.
And here.
And yeah, and for your glutes and all the, like, glute medius, minimus, and maximus, all the glutes. But it's especially bad for your knees because you're forcing if your hips don't have the turnout and you force your feet into turnout and your hips into turnout and squeeze, then your knees are the only thing left to find that rotation. And the knee joint is pretty much not meant to, there's a teeny bit of rotation available in the knee, but it's not something we're supposed to like go for. Yeah, we're not like, let's explore rotation in the knee. So let's talk about how to find the right turnout. So Katherine's going to face the barre, and she's going to swing one foot out to one side and coming back in. And then swing the other toes out to the other side, yes. Now what we want to do here, so the glute maximus, just so you know, is a lateral rotator. However, we do not want to use the gluteus maximus as our primary lateral rotator when it comes to dance or barre. So the quadratus femoris, I'm going to let Katherine point to her quadratus femoris, is one of the deep lateral rotators. And that's the one you want to feel working. So Katherine, reach one toe out to the side, yep, and come back. And then she'll do her left and reaching out, yes. Perfect. And do one more time each way, yes. So you can see you want to feel it like right up under here. You don't want to feel these muscles like, it just doesn't work. Perfect. Hands back to the barre. She's now going to rock back on her heels and open both toes. And it's important to get into it this way because we don't know what size your feet are. Now she's going to put a little pressure into the balls of her feet and swing her heels back out. Perfect. This is best done in socks on a hardwood floor or a slippery surface. Carpet might be a little challenging and you don't want to strain your knee. So from here, she's going to use quadratus femoris and swing her heels forward and then coming back to parallel. All the while the pelvis stays neutral and swing the heels forward and back to parallel. So she's going to keep going while I talk. You could do this 8 to 10 times. It's nice to do before a barre class, so even if your instructor or your teacher hasn't talked really much about this, if you do it a couple times before you start, then you'll have the memory of where that muscle is, so you can start your little turnout muscles kicking in the right way. Perfect. And finally, we'll talk about tendus in a second. Katherine's going to face front, and she's going to go into a first position and just reach one leg forward in what we will talk about in a second, tendu. And then using those same muscles, she's going to turn in, and she's going to turn out. Yep. And in, out. Yep. And in. And let's show it wrong. You don't want to do in and lift the hip. Yep. Perfect. Alrighty then. And lastly, we'll talk about the term square, what it means when we want your pelvis to be square. So since we just had the leg out, what you don't want to happen is anything it turns and rotates. Square usually means that you've lost this square. So this here, when you reach the leg forward, it stays, it doesn't cross. Very common to the side. If someone tries to go too much aside, not everybody's side is a perfect side. Most people have a front side where the square is lost. Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah, that's not perfect. And finally, actually angle so they can see. When you tendu back, the hips eventually, the higher you get, do rotate open, but it shouldn't be the first thing that happens. So do it wrong. It's not like that's your lead-in. The hips, you're keeping them as square as possible. So it's another term often used, as square as possible, when we know that at some point there is some rotation that happens. Alrighty. So that is our definition of square. Okay, moving on to hip hiking. Now there's a great teacher here in Manhattan, Finus Young, and when you take his class, he often mentions, and it's a very good point, Katherine, go into a grand plie, and we'll show this from the back, that if you can do a grand plie where your femur is coming out at a 90 degree from the torso and your hips are level, then there's no need to hike the hip. What often happens when people get in, they go to do a pirouette and whatever, it's just instinct, they lift, and then there's no way you can get around. So if you can do that and your hips are level, then you can pick up your knee. So Katherine's going to face me, just to turn back to the bar, back to the bar, yep. No, back to the bar.
Back,
as in back.
As in not return.
Yes. So we're going to watch her hips, and she's going to draw her knee up into passe and thinking of reaching out. Yes. So it may be helpful to think of the knee reaching out to the side as opposed to I am picking my thigh bone up. If you think I'm flexing the knee and trying to touch the outer wall with my knee, then you have a better chance, we hope, of keeping the hips nice and level. This is very important if you ever want your leg to go higher than 90. You cannot start with this because then you'll never be accessing the right muscles to get the leg higher than 90. And it's also very important if you do want to start turning. If you immediately lift the hip, then you're already off balance. All right, moving on to the feet. Obviously the feet are a very important part of dance. So we have two positions of the feet. This is often called demi-point, and then this would be point. So just starting first, and she's going to, it's called a tendu, which means to stretch, and you always want to lead with the heel, speaking of turnout. You want to lead with the heel, and she's going to go to a demi-point, and then point, then demi-point, and back in. So this can be a good little way to practice articulating the feet. Because technically, every time, and let's go side now, I think you're not, demi-point, point, every time you do this, you should be articulating through your feet. We humans were given the gift of articulate feet, and so we should use them. So let's talk about what we don't want to happen. We don't want sickling. That's when your toes point towards the midline of your body. And you also don't want what we call cashew foot, where you point your toes but not your ankle. You always want a nice stretched ankle. So no sickling and no cashew foot. Very important. So as we practice rolling through our ankles, you're going to bend your knees, and then you roll up through a forced arch, so you get that demi-point, and then you straighten your knees, pull the kneecaps up, and come on down. So you bend, roll through, and straighten, really pull the kneecaps up, and then we reverse it. You're still in neutral. mic pack excluded, up and bend, and heels down. And this is very important. We're going to show you next in close-ups what we don't want to happen. Perfect. So you do it in parallel, and then we'll do a couple in turnout where you bend, roll through, and straighten, pull the kneecaps up, lower down, bend, rolling through, straighten, and reversing. So you want to get up as high on the ball of your foot as you can with stability, which is what we're about to talk about, what we don't want to see happening. Alrighty, so Katherine's going to stay here facing the bar. You can come this way a little bit if you want, and come to parallel facing the bar, yep. And she's going to open up about hip bone distance apart, sit bone rather, excuse me, so a little narrower, pardon me, yep. And she's going to roll, bend her knees, sorry, roll through a forced arch. Now, what you will look at as a teacher is make sure those ankles are straight. So, Katherine, do it wrong real quick because we're going to show a close-up. Okay, so yeah, that's what we don't want, but we also don't want you rolling out. Yes, that's the one I was going for first. That's really, so we have a high heel workout coming up on our site because we see that a lot with wobbly ankles. It's very dangerous. So go up again, up, and roll, and you don't want the ankles to roll out. You also don't want, if you start to transfer weight just to one foot, that you pull out of that. So if you're not going to be a point dancer, it's less important. But if you're going to be a point dancer, it's very important to have the strength when you transfer weight to one foot. And it's a lot easier when your legs are completely straight. So that could be a way to start, is that go up again, go up at releve, and you transfer your weight with a fully extended or plantar flexed ankle that you can transfer weight from one leg to the other. Very important. So even in just a regular fitness bar class, you know, a lot of these knee raises are done. You want to have articulate feet, so when you bring your foot off the floor, you're using your foot. And since we just talked about hip hiking, since classes start a lot with that, you don't want it to be this. Your sit bones should be reaching towards the floor and the knee coming up. Lastly, we want to talk about arm placement and upper body carriage. So even if you're just doing a fitness bar class, why not look better while doing it? And that way when you go out in your strapless dress or your bikini, you're improving your carriage and your posture and your appearance and the way you present yourself to the world all the time. So let's talk about what it is in ballet. And I know there's a lot with the arm at the side. So just lift your arm, Katherine, without any care in the world. Yeah. So what we want with ballet is you want the shoulder down, the elbow lifted, and then the palm facing forward, which for me can be a massive stretch along this muscle when I'm doing it correctly. From there, she's going to take her arm overhead, but notice the shoulder stays down. Now, we have the type that we have to think of almost straightening our arm. Bend your arm, Katherine. So some people get away with that. We have these bony little elbows, and it never looked pretty. I have to think of reaching, and I find it helpful to think of reaching through the fourth finger. And for that matter, come back to the side. If you think of soft fingers, but you think of your ring finger or your middle finger, whichever works for you, and your thumb as sort of energetically reaching towards each other, not like touching, but think of that it can help you even if you don't have a soft hand. You know, don't want to claw the air, but sometimes you're tense. If you put your tension into your ring finger, it can sort of give you that. The other thought is you're holding a hula hoop. So bring your arms in front, both in front. If you were holding a giant hula hoop, then these bones would be lifted. Like you would never want to be here and you wouldn't want to be here. And then arms out to the side, and then bring the arm down. And so this action is called a port-de-bras. And so just think of carrying it front, and then up, and then side. You can follow with your head and down. So it's very important when your arm is out to the side, you want that shoulder down, elbow lifted, palm facing forward. And again, for me, that's a lot of work.
Right, and it is a lot of work.
Yes.
Like I feel the muscles in my back working. Yeah.
Right, it's not easy. So we used to laugh when teachers would say to us, because that was one of our big things, relax your shoulders. I'm like, oh, they're relaxed. No, I feel great. And they're like, what I have to do is I have to actively pull these muscles down. So engaging the lower trapezius, which are these muscles here, and the lats, and constantly keep my back fully engaged so that I keep the shoulder down, elbow lifted, palm facing forward. And it's not easy. And for some people it may be. It was not for us. There was finally one teacher who said to us, you have to actively pull your shoulders down. And I was like, well, people kept telling me to relax. And I was like, okay. So it's very important.
This might be relaxed to you.
Yes, but that's not right. So you want all of these muscles engaged. So there's a lot to think about. But we've talked about pelvic placement, hiking square. We've talked about turnout, where it comes from, quadratus femoris, not big glutes. We've talked about articulating through the feet, both when you're pointing your feet and releving. And then finally, the upper body carriage. And don't forget, that means long neck. Thanks for watching, and don't forget PilatesOnFifthOnline.com.